Okay, so which test is more difficult in mathematics? Is it the SAT or the ACT? And so that's going to be the topic of this video. Now, as I'm making this video, the month and the year, currently there's a lot of debate or changes going on with college placement. Some colleges are temporarily not requiring SAT or ACT scores, others still are. But the bottom line is there's still millions of students are going to be taking the SAT or the ACT, and are trying to figure out which one should they take. Okay, so what I'm going to try to do in this particular video is give you some insight on the math sections so you can make a determination. Because if you're looking for me to give you an absolute answer like, oh, the ACT is easier than the SAT in terms of the math section, well, that's not necessarily the case. Okay, so there's not going to be a right or wrong or a discrete kind of answer or opinion here, but I am going to give you some information that I think will help you determine, which test you want to kind of focus on. All right, so we're going to get into all of that in just 1 second, but first let me quickly introduce myself. My name is John. I'm the founder of TabletClass Math. I'm also a middle and high school math teacher, and over several years I've constructed what I like to believe is one of the best online math help programs there is. Of course, I'll let you be the judge of that. If you're interested, you could check out my math help program by following the link in the description of this video. But basically, I have all the main math courses: pre-algebra, algebra 1, geometry, algebra 2. I'm going to be launching pre-calculus here shortly. And then I have many test preparation courses like the SAT or ACT, GED, GRE, GMAT. And by the way, the GRE and GMAT are kind of like the SAT and the ACT for graduate school. So just so you know, if you're obviously if you're watching this video, you're likely going to be taking the SAT or ACT. But these tests, if you continue on with your education, there's just exams after exams after exams. So, it's probably a good idea to start learning how to take these major exams in your life because it's probably not the last one you're going to be taking. So, anyways, I do other tests like teacher certification, nursing entrance. So the bottom line is all these exams that I just mentioned have significant math on them. And if you don't get them through the math sections, you're not going to pass these exams. So if you're preparing for one of those exams, just go to my site, check out my full course catalog. I should be able to help you out. Now, I also do a lot with independent learners like homeschoolers. So if you homeschool, I have a great homeschool learning program. And then I just help those you out as well. They're struggling in your math class. So maybe you're taking Algebra 2 and you need additional help. I can definitely help you out. Now, one thing that you need to be doing that I can't do for you that you need to be doing to help yourself out in math, and that is taking great math notes. So, over decades of teaching mathematics, one thing is apparent to me: those students who take fantastic math notes almost do very well in their math classes and on these exams as well. And the reverse is true. Those students who, like to do other things during math class, look at their cell phone, talk to their buddies, all the things that I did way back in the good old days, except for the cell phone part. Good thing that those weren't around. I'm not even sure I would have graduated because they're completely distracting. The key and secret to learning, not just math, is focus. Okay, the better you can focus, the better you're going to learn, bottom line. And the one activity will help you stay focused is note taking. So take a strong or take a hard look at your notes and really ask yourself, can they be better? For the most part, almost all of you can stand some room for improvement. But as you improve, I have detailed comprehensive math notes that you can study from. Those include pre-algebra, algebra 1, geometry, algebra 2, and trigonometry. You can find the links to those notes in the description of this video. Okay, so as I stated, I've been teaching math for a long time, decades, and along with all those years, way back, met several years ago, I used to do a lot of tutoring. Okay, so one thing you may or may not know that math teachers are in demand, or in high demand, as math tutors as well. So. Especially at the high school level, various parents, if they could help their kids out, because it's expensive to hire top-notch math tutors. To help prepare their students for the SAT or ACT. So I've done a lot of tutoring, several years, been teaching for several years. So this is something I feel pretty comfortable speaking about. Again, I'm not going to give you an absolute, this is easier than this, but I am going to give you information that you need to kind of reflect upon and then, kind of organize and strategize a plan. Okay, so that's the whole idea behind this video. So let's go ahead and first take a look at the SAT. So we're going to take a look at the SAT first, just get a good sense of what's on the test, and we'll look at the ACT next, and then we'll do some kind of two comparisons, and then you'll have to start thinking to yourself, maybe this test is a little bit better for me. All right, so SAT. Let's talk about the SAT here. All right, now I'm assuming most of you out there have a basic idea of the SAT and ACT. If you don't, you might want to go do some other research just to have more of a basic understanding of these exams. So kind of who my target is for this particular video is students that have already kind of looked into both, but just still trying to figure out which one they should take. All right, so the SAT has 58 questions, okay, and 80 minutes. So this is, and we're talking about the math section now, okay? And it's broken up into two math sections. Now, one thing that you need to pay special note to is that one of the math sections allows a calculator and the other doesn't. Okay, so remember this because this is different in terms of the ACT. All right, so we're going to kind of do an overview, but we're going to do kind of like a compare and contrast with the ACT. All right, so two sections, all right, 58 questions, 80 minutes. So if you look at this, you're like, all right, you have over 1 minute per question. Now, one of the things that I'm not talking about in this video is test taking tactics, all right? And that's very important, but I am going to kind of briefly talk about some of this stuff at the end of the video. But let's just kind of get a sense of what's on the test or the test format. Okay, so two sections. Part of the test you can use your calculator, the other part you cannot. So the no calculator part, there's 20 questions and 25 minutes, okay, for that. So you can see I have a little bit over a minute for the part with no calculator. And then the calculator part, you have 38 questions and 55 minutes. So in all of these sections here, both of these sections, you have over 1 minute per question. So if you're thinking about like a pacing, all right, here's the question, here's your, your options, you got to think about, can I effectively answer these questions in about 1 minute? So it's going to be different than like, let's say in school, where you might have 3 to 5 minutes on a particular question. Here, you got to, really take a look at how much time you have per question. So let me just state right up front, on the SAT, you're going to have more time per question than the ACT. Well, we'll look at that more thoroughly here in a second. Okay, so that's a big difference, calculator and no calculator. You'll see that here in a second in terms of the ACT, the difference here. But kind of what's on the test. All right, well, algebra is a huge part of it. So there's 19 questions generally in the algebra section. Then there's problem solving, data analysis, which still involves some algebra and some probability, some basic statistics kind of information. There's like 17 questions there. Advanced mathematics, this could be like, let's say, logarithms, exponential equations. There's going to be 16 questions there. And then you got some geometry and even some trigonometry. So there'll be like 6 questions here. So kind of like how I would summarize in both tests, okay, the math that's going to be on both tests is the following. Okay, you definitely have to be super strong in Algebra 1. Okay, like that's really, really critical. You definitely need to know geometry for sure. Okay, this is why you don't want to take geometry after Algebra 2. And you really kind of need to be finished or finishing up with Algebra 2. And this is for both of these exams. Now, here in the SAT, there's even some possible trig that you might be facing. And oftentimes, this is not taught until you get into pre-calculus or an Algebra 2 trig. But generally, it's not right here. But if there's only a few questions, it's not going to, in other words, if you haven't had trigonometry, but you know all this other stuff, you'll still do very, very well on this test. So that's one of the considerations you have to have. You don't have to know everything 100%. I mean, it's obviously great that if you've taken trigonometry before, you definitely need to know geometry, though. That one I would have to say yes. You just can't know algebra, and that's it to do well on the SAT or the ACT. So you got to be pretty much finished up with geometry. So these are the kind of like the real core courses for sure. Algebra 2 is very, very important as well. And if you think about it, generally speaking, for most students, they're going to be taking Algebra 1 as a freshman, and then they should have geometry by the time they're a sophomore, or maybe they took this as a freshman. And then as a junior, they should be in Algebra 2, and you start taking the SAT and the ACT for most students in the second semester of your junior year. And so by the time you are a senior, okay, you should have had all these courses, and maybe you're in some sort of pre-calculus course, because obviously SAT and ACT, you're going to college, so you're probably on some sort of college prep track. Okay. All right. So now let's take a look at the ACT. All right. So right off the bat, what are the big differences here? Well, 60 questions, 60 minutes. So you kind of have like one main section, and you got 60 questions, 60 minutes. So you can just do the math right there. You have 1 minute max per question. Okay. So it's a little bit shorter time pressure than the SAT. And there's two categories, not really like two sections, kind of like two categories. There's like a higher math and an essential skills kind of math categories, but effectively, it's pretty much the same kind of math as the SAT. So algebra, functions, geometry, statistics, probability. Again, when you look at both the SAT and ACT, there'll be differences. They'll say, okay, this test has this percentage of this topic, and this has, like 15%, functions. I personally wouldn't get wrapped up on how much percent this has and this has. The bottom line is this: you need to be excellent at high school level mathematics, okay? Because you just never know what kind of questions you're going to get. And so, again, that's Algebra 1, geometry, and Algebra 2, right? If you're like super strong in these courses, you're going to have, the foundational skills to handle, questions on functions, geometry, probability, obviously all the things you learn in algebra. Okay. I wouldn't be like, okay, I'm good at functions. This one, I'm not so good at this topic. I personally would not be looking at which test to take because you're weak in this one and this one has a little bit more, because these are just general guidelines we're going to be on this test. The bottom line is it's still measuring your, are you ready for college level mathematics? Okay, this is a college entrance exam. And so, college level mathematics at the kind of the minimum level is going to be like college algebra, which is kind of like an Algebra 2 version at the college level. Now, mind you, the SAT and ACT are college admissions exams. They're not placement exams. Sometimes they can be used as placements, depending on how your college breaks it down, but they're not a straight placement course, kind of like, let's say, the AccuPlacer or the Alex is. This is for, your admission into a college, but these scores can also impact your placement as well. So it all depends on the college. But the bottom line here, the main point I'm trying to make is, both of these tests are covering high school level mathematics, and these are the core courses right here. All right. Again, pre-calculus, that's definitely a bonus if you're in pre-calculus, but it's definitely not necessary. You're not going to see like super advanced trigonometric equations and all this other kind of stuff that you learn in pre-calculus on either one of these tests. You might see a little bit of trig, and you might see definitely some more advanced mathematics, but again, that's going to be covered a lot in Algebra 2 if you're in a good Algebra 2 course. Okay, so let's go ahead and make some real big observations here that I think will help you kind of summarize some important factors about both of these tests to help you make a decision. First of all, let me just state the following. I think it's smart for those of you out there that are trying to figure out, should I go for the SAT or the ACT, you should take both. If it's possible, you should take both, or at least get both books and do the practice test on it. Okay, see how you do. All right, so that's the first thing. Don't just decide in advance, I'm going to take only one of these tests without even trying the other tests, because there's other factors involved. There's other sections that you're going to have to consider as well. So we're only talking about the math section. Also, too, do some research on the colleges that you're looking at. Do they have a preference on whether that's they like the SAT or the ACT, or they just don't care? But the bottom line is you should sample both exams. Even if you don't take the actual exams themselves, at least try to take the practice exams. And that's why it's so critical to give yourself enough time to prepare for this. So hopefully you're watching this video in the beginning of your junior year. Well, if you're second semester junior year in high school, all right, so that's and you're in the time range, but this is stuff that would be more beneficial for you, even like let's say in your sophomore 10th grade year in high school. But let's go ahead and take a look at these comparisons between these two exams. So the SAT, again, you're going to have more than 1 minute per question. Okay, so that's definitely a consideration. And I would say it's definitely more critical thinking. All right, the test questions on SAT are definitely a little bit more challenging, I would state. Okay, in terms of figuring out the solution, it's not going to be so direct. It's not going to be like your high school, chapter test and whatnot. It's going to be a little bit different. Um, they also, on the SAT, there is a short reference sheet, okay, so with formulas and whatnot. So you could take a look at that. Just get an SAT practice book, and you could see what's on that reference sheet. Again, there's two sections, and one of those sections you cannot use a calculator. Now, having a calculator is tremendously advantageous. Okay, so it's really it is a big deal to be able to use a calculator. It's not necessary, but just remember on the SAT, there's a section where there is not you cannot use a calculator. Also, there's multiple choice and grid in. Okay, grid in is like you fill in your answer. So if the answer is 367.8, you're going to have to plug that in. You're not going to see A, B, C, and then just select your choice. That's just a straight multiple choice. A grid in is like fill in the blank. So for some of you out there, that you might be, that's a little bit scary, because you're not just going to have multiple choice options to choose from. And then on the SAT, there are 4 multiple choice options, obviously A, B, C, and D on those particular questions. But again, there are grid ins, and then there's a section where you cannot use a calculator. All right, now let's take a look at the ACT. So the ACT, again, it's 1 minute per question. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to be spending 1 minute per each question, because you might get a question correct in 30 seconds or 20 seconds, or some questions might take you a little bit more time. So, but in general, you're talking about 60 questions and 60 minutes. Now, the questions on ACT are going to be they're similar to the SAT questions, but they're going to be more maybe like your high school level chapter exams. They're going to be a little bit more what you're probably used to in terms of recalling information, etc. So if you've done well in your chapter test, or if you like that kind of test taking format, the ACT might be something you might want to be thinking about. But what's on the ACT? Check this out. There's no reference sheet. Here on the SAT, there is a short reference sheet. So you need to take a look at this reference sheet on the SAT and ask yourself, you better have a good memory and be able to recall everything for the ACT. Whereas the SAT, you can have at least this little reference sheet here, so you can kind of look towards. So take a look at that. Now the ACT, you can use your calculator for the entire test. That is definitely an advantage, right? Knowing how to use your calculator, and again, where do you learn how to maximize, your calculator? Well, hopefully you're learning this in math class. Okay, what you're doing in your actual class is critical to how well you're going to do on these exams. Okay, so this is not the video to be talking about how to use your calculator, but there are things for sure that a calculator can help you out, definitely. Now, the ACT is all multiple choice, so you're not going to have any of these grid in questions, right? So you're not going to have to fill in like a block right here, and say, okay, this is 367.8. None of that. it's going to be all multiple choice, but the multiple choice options are 5. So that's a little bit different there. So it's going to be A, B, C, D, E. Okay, so now you have you're going to have to find the right answer out of 5. Over here, it was to find the right answer out of 4. So there are differences. I mean, some of these could be pros and cons, right? It all depends. Like, oh wow, I want the reference sheet, but okay, well, are you going to be okay with the grid in and no calculator? Or maybe you're like, you know what? I like um, the ACT because it's going to be more like my high school exams, and I get to use my calculator. But guess what? There's no reference sheet, and you're going to have more choices to have to go through on the multiple choice. So as you can see, these tests are different. Okay, now which one is right for you? Well, you're going to have to figure it out. Again, I think you should take both and just see how you do, right? Get the feel for it and look at the other factors that are non math related in terms of the other sections. And then, uh, sample both exams. Now, my personal opinion is once you've kind of done enough, research and tried both of these exams and then, kind of sample them, I think it's good to kind of hone in eventually on one. In other words, start to get to a point where you can say, you know what, I'm going to really focus in on the ACT. And then that way you can just start practicing or really mastering the ACT and just focus on getting better at that. And by the way, too, a lot of you out there are going to take these exams, the actual exams, more than once, probably at least 2 times, maybe 3, or maybe even 4 times. So, you have to look at how colleges will take your scores. Will they take the top score in the math section, depending on your test, etc. There's a lot of other factors, but the main idea here is this. Okay, and let's go ahead and wrap this up. The first thing is give yourself enough time to figure this out. Okay, hopefully you're not watching this video as being a senior in high school. If you are, then it is what it is. You do the best you can, but it's if you're watching this as a junior or sophomore, then that's really, really good because you have more time to figure this out. Okay? These are huge tests. They have serious, major, impact on your future in terms of what colleges you're going to get into. So you got to take them serious. But the best advice I can give you as a math teacher is one, really, really do well in your current math classes. Okay, to like commit to excellence, and I think that's the main thing that I'll leave you with. Both of these tests are going to have similar, going to be testing basically the same topics more or less. There's differences and whatnot, but we're really coming down to high school level math, algebra 1, geometry, algebra 2, and then maybe some little bit of trigonometry. So the best thing you could do for yourself as you're figuring this out is to pay attention in class and master these topics. And that's what I focus on in my SAT and ACT math prep courses. Of course, you can find a link to that. Just go to my main site and go into the test prep section. And you'll see my test prep courses. But both of my current courses are 25 chapters, right? And it basically covers all of this stuff right there, what you're going to see in it, which is a huge amount of information. But the number one thing I can stress to all of you out there is make sure you have strong math skills. Now that seems obvious, but too many people they'll say like, you know what, I'm going to just get an SAT and ACT book and start taking practice tests. But they are still kind of weak in a lot of the concepts taught in Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. Make sure you're good to go on these concepts. Strengthen your skills here, and then do the other stuff that's necessary, which is taking practice tests and learning about the test-taking tactics as well. So that is also a component in terms of being prepared to take these tests. So, taking the SAT and the ACT is quite involved, right? That's why you want to give yourself enough time. And but if you work hard at this thing, you're going to do very well. Okay, but again, don't be afraid to make adjustments and explore both exams. Okay, because you're really not going to know in advance which one's going to be best for you. All right, so hopefully this video was helpful to you. Again, I didn't want to be discreet, but like, oh, take the ACT, it's better than the SAT, because that's just not the case. But information knowledge is power. Let's just say that. So hopefully you have more knowledge now, so you can kind of reflect on this, so you can make some decisions about your future. All right, so if this video helped you out in some way, please consider smashing that like button. That helps me out. And if you're new to my YouTube channel, please consider subscribing. I do videos like this, but most of the videos I do are in actual math topics. So a ton of the stuff that I do is going to be, on concepts that are going to be on SAT and ACT. So if you like my teaching style, please feel free to explore all the videos, which I have, hundreds, if not over 1,000 videos on my YouTube channel that can help you prepare for the SAT and ACT sections. Of course, my best math help for these exams will be my actual test prep courses, and you know where to find those. Okay, so with that being said, I definitely wish you all the best on the SAT or ACT and all your mathematics adventures. Thank you for your time, and have a great day.